Hello, my name is Anthony Russo, and today for my health final project, I will be looking at the NFL and its battle with concussions. More so, I will be answering the question of what is the NFL doing to reduce concussions. Now, I'm sure everyone watching this video has had or knows someone that has had a concussion and more or less knows what it is. But to go over it really quickly, a concussion is a brain injury in which a impact to the head causes the brain to shift and hit against the inner wall of the skull, causing damage to the brain. It can be very dangerous, lead to many injuries, some can be very long-lasting, and as a physical sport, the NFL has to deal with this kind of situation a lot. It's a lot of, contact, head-to-head, which is, I'll go into later, they're trying to reduce, but more or less, the NFL is a concussion-prone sport, and in the past couple of years, they've had the issue brought to them, and basically their hand has been forced in attempting to reduce concussions. So in this project, I will be outlining what they have done. Starting with one of the major two areas that the NFL is focusing in, rule changes. The NFL has had strict rule changes and had changed the way that they have worded a lot of their officiating practices. Penalties that have been altered recently in the interest of preventing injuries, mainly concussions, have been roughing the passer calls, unnecessary roughness calls, unsportsmanlike conduct calls, late hit calls, pass interference calls, and just any general tweak they can make to protect the players. That is their main interest. Now, all of these calls have existed in the future, but in many cases, in all of these cases that I've just mentioned, the rate at which they're being called and the severity of the infraction needed to call it has very much gone down. In other words, it's much easier to be called for these penalties as they're being stricter and they want to protect the players as much as possible. One that's especially been debated, and it's mostly infamous, is the changes to the roughing the passer call, as it seems it's very easy to get one of those calls. You barely hit the guy and you get a penalty, and that's 15 yards. And while a lot of people are angry by it, it goes a long way in helping the players. I mean, I've seen so many less quarterback injuries this year. Unnecessary roughness calls have been called. I mean, anything head-to-head, which is relatively new in the past, decade. Anytime a player goes head-to-head in a tackle and it isn't easy to say that that wasn't intentional, like as long as it wasn't a complete accident, you get called for it. And oftentimes you can get kicked out of the game. And that's just one step that they're making to make concussions a lot less of a problem and make the game safer as a whole. Rule changes and rule strictness has been very helpful in preventing injuries that are still going to occur, but the amount of concussions have been down, at least from what I've seen. Now to the second and most important avenue in which the NFL is looking into to increase player safety is health research. Reading directly from the NFL Player Health and Safety website, it says, the NFL supports preeminent experts and institutions in their research on the diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of sports-related injuries and other issues affecting NFL players' health, safety, and well-being. A few examples of the NFL investing in health and safety research can be found on this same website. The website lists that in 2016, the NFL allotted $40 million, it's a lot, for medical research primarily dedicated to neuroscience. The same year, the NFL assembled the Scientific Advisory Board, or the SAB. In 2018, the same board granted $35 million in total funding to 5 projects for research being conducted by investigative teams. This investigation was done to put more research into the diagnosis, treatment, and natural history studies of concussions. In July of 2021, the SAB Council announced a 4-year, $4 million award to the team of medical researchers led by the University of Wisconsin who were investigating the prevention and treatment of hamstring injuries in elite football players. So concussions aren't the only source of research done by the NFL, obviously. There are way more parts of the body. But that being said, concussions are a major interest of the NFL. An example of just how much the NFL cares about concussion research and prevention, I will be telling you about the NFL Helmet Challenge, which took place in July of 2021. The NFL Helmet Challenge was an innovation challenge that aimed to stimulate the development by experts, innovators, and helmet manufacturers for a new NFL helmet that players could wear that would outperform laboratory testing of other helmets and would be safer than all current helmets worn by NFL players. As previously stated, the challenge took place in July of 2021. Applicants submitted their helmet prototypes, and they were used for testing in laboratory conditions. They represented potentially concussive impacts in the NFL, and the applicants were all competing for a prize of up to $1 million. Personally, I think the NFL has come a long way in the past couple years in increasing player safety and preventing concussions. Clearly, to the NFL, player safety is an absolute priority, if that has not been outlined to you already from what I've discussed in this. A big goal of the NFL is to prevent not only concussions, but CTE, which is a long-term brain deformity disease that can come from concussions or too many hits to the head and has been prevalent in retired and currently deceased NFL players. There's been a lot of research into the subject. I could make a whole different video on CTE, but this one is mostly related to just the base level concussions. This subject means a lot to me because in the past I've had many concussions myself. I've had about 3, with at least one of them being moderate to severe and causing me a lot of problems that I've thus recovered from, but it was not an easy recovery, so it's a big deal to me. And of the 3 concussions, only one of them I received in football, but the other 2 were in hockey, and they're very similar sports in the way that there's a lot of contact and how contact is allowed. I mean, I guess in football it's heavily encouraged. You need contact, but yes, they're both very contact-heavy sports. Honestly, I'm excited for the future of the NFL and their safety protocols. I think safety is a great thing for them to focus on because nobody likes to see a player get hurt. And players play a lot better when they know that their health and their safety isn't as much of a concern. And it's good that the NFL is concerned for them so that they can focus on winning football games. And while a lot of people find a lot of controversy in these changes, mostly fans see controversy in the changes of the rule calling. Players themselves, there's been a lot of issues about players complaining about different helmets, not wanting to wear this helmet, wanting to wear a helmet that they wore in the past that maybe didn't pass current day testing protocols, and they're like, I don't want to change my helmet. But I think personally that I think everyone should see these rule changes as a good thing, as they overall improve the game, and clearly the NFL agrees. If I were to give you one takeaway from the research I've done in the creation of this video, I would say that clearly the NFL cares and has put a lot of time and effort and resources into the prevention of concussions for their players and the increasement of their health and safety. If you'd like to look at the sources that I used to create this video, you can find them in the description below. I've been Anthony Russo, and this is my final project. Thank you so much for listening.